On. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Boena and the crew from RECAS. Thank you, Alma, for having time to join us here and for helping me. I will not speak very long. Just a few words about Alma. Alma is a good, and now I have to say also old friend, and also a person that I was working with for quite a long time. I've learned a lot from her, and also I hope I taught her some things. Alma is a researcher and a political worker. I think I may say, very engaged for almost 2 decades now, which only speaks about how old is she now, in local, regional, and European movements and political organizations, let's say. At the moment, she's working for the Bank Watch organization, European organization. And often when we have chats, I say that she's my favorite politologist. There are some politologists here. Alma is originally finished political sciences, and she's my favorite politologist, I say, because she's among very few politologists that are actually doing politics in not politics in a sense of influencing discourses and thinking, but actually making policies for institutions and for local governments and municipalities. So maybe that's part of her being lucky, of being part of some of these things, but also I think it has to do with her being excellent in what she does. So Alma will talk about issues in water governance, because this is her specialty and also something very, very close to her heart, but also I think something very close to not only to our hearts, but also to our stomachs, to our bodies, in most immediate sense. So Alma will speak around 40 minutes, I think, or something like that, and then we will have a discussion, hopefully. You are all invited to join. So Alma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Boriša, hvala, and thank you for the opportunity to say something on a, I would say, important topic that will become even more crucial in the decades that come in front of us, but you will hear about this more in the lecture. Also, I want to say that Boriša is my favorite editor, and he sharpened my research skills to extent which is, I would say, sometimes between crazy, but also what I do now with local self-governance communities and legal representatives and governments. I luckily found a way to translate what we were working in Srbina for more than 7 years on to a bit translated into this, let's say, political science language. So this was, without this experience of working with Boriša, I would definitely not be here, but let's not lose the time, because it will be very challenging to tell you all of this in 40 minutes. I will start with my presentation. Just a second. Okay. Hope you see it. And just to okay, and how it goes. It doesn't work now. Just a second. Oh my God, it doesn't want to start. Okay. What I'm going to base my lecture today is mostly on the findings of my fieldwork of supporting of mostly movements for the protection of water and rivers in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in the region, as Boriša mentioned. And on the study on commons in Southeast Europe, which we done, I think, back in 2018, and it was done by the Institute of Political Ecology from Zagreb, and I was working mostly with Tomislav Tomašević and Vedran Horvat on the case that I will present you, case of water supplying system. Okay, so this is important for the context, I will say. Regarding the agenda, we will go through short introduction, then some facts and figures regarding the water consumption and general state of water, just to give you a broad sense on why this topic I found very important. And then I will go to models of governance, but I will not stay long on the public governance and private governance, but I will focus on the commoning model and will present the case of Luke water supplying system. And hopefully in the end, we will have some time for questions and answers. And on this, on this picture, you can see River Una. It's my main motive why I started to be very active in these movements, but also why I started to analyze and write about topic of governance of water. So regarding facts and figures, to this what is already presented on this slide, I would maybe focus on this problems of water shortages. As you can see, 1/3 of European countries are already facing it. And I would say it's important to remember last summer with all of these droughts and how the states were coping with this problem. And also in recent findings, I see that there are even some negotiation between the states, for example, Albania and Italy, on preparing some kinds of infrastructural projects to deliver water from Albania all the way to Italy, which is quite interesting if you are thinking about governance of water, also climate factors, as I said. And in this context, I think this is very problematic that almost 30% of the largest underground water system is already being depleted and so on. I would just add to these figures also that from 2020, you can find water even on Wall Street, and they are using this model of futures, which is very interesting also concept if you go into a bit details about it. And also, we should not forget that water is being on the market for pretty long time, and a lot of companies are included in this. Maybe just to name one, it's Veolia from France. You could read about a lot of cases that got wrong with privatization of water, in which this company was included. Also, I would mention here something that we maybe do not speak a lot because in recent years, we can hear a lot of that technology will save us, and nobody is considering how much water this technology and especially IT sector is using. So, for example, Google Center in data centers only in the USA have used more than 12 milliards of liters of fresh water in 2021. Also there in certain conflict regions, we can see that acid mine drainage from mines accounts for nearly 71% of all sources contributing toward polluted rivers across South Africa, for example. And when I speak about droughts, we can see here that when in these regions there are droughts, the water is used for big tech, not for water supplying of the people, which is, in my opinion, not only ethical problem, but also big political problem too. I will not now present you. There are a lot of cases if we say conflicts on water, just to name maybe Bolivia and from 2000s and what happened there, so-called water wars or water shutoffs in Detroit in 2014. There were huge uprisings in Ireland in 2014 against privatization of water. If we go here close to Greece in 2011, water became also something that should go in super fund, so-called super fund. And maybe it's important to mention that after 12 years of struggle, that was also supported by European water movement and led in Greece mostly by unions, they managed to win. So the water is no longer part of this super fund. Also in 2016 in Slovenia, water became protected by, oh my God, I'm losing words, by Ustav Constitution. But I would say, although this is like positive news, they never adopted laws and bylaws to put this into force. Because by this, they said that water is in the ownership of all citizens of Slovenia. But if you are looking to concessions, citizens do not participate in decision making of water resources. So I will go now to the models of governance. So first one is, and mostly predominant one is public model of governance of water, and public management is in public management, water is not treated as a commodity, of course, because it's so essential for everyone's life, and its use of water, you cannot provide it to all without this assumption. At least this is my position, and I will explain it afterwards a bit more. Water is governed by governmental or state entities, mostly public utilities, and I would say that advantage is that there is still public and political, I would say, accountability, because we elect governments, we elect local self-governance. At least in Bosnia and Herzegovina, level of local self-governance is making decision on investment in water supplying system, but also in the let's say prices of water supplying. Also regarding what are positive aspects of public governance of water, I would say also that there is one body that makes that is overseeing the whole system, which is always better. Because it coordinates more easier between different parts of water supplying system, or, for example, from maintenance to parts where you can see where it's being from maintenance to other parts of the system. Public utilities are making decision on how much water do we need, how to get it to the citizens, on maintenance, and also they are taking care about quality also of water, which is very important because when it's under public governance, we also have, at least examples show that we have more of the quality tests of water, because this costs also. So maybe you would be interested how the prices of water are made. So we pay for the electric energy needed for pumping the water. Also, the workers that are maintaining the grid. Also, all that needs to be repaired, we pay for that. They say that every year, like 2% of the whole grid needs to be repaired. It's like something technical. And as I said, the price is mostly being decided on by local self-governance. In some cases in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's done also by the cantonal government, but I will not go into details with our political system, then it would take much more time. And I would say in Bosnia and Herzegovina, most of the water supply utilities and companies are still in the public ownership, which is important. But there are the cases where we can see entrance of private capital, and we have only one case of the privatized water company. It's the water company in Modrića. And private capital is 55%, and allegedly this should not happen. If you look through the laws, it was done, I think, back in 2015, I think, and they say it was administrative mistake. So the problem that this local community is facing today is because it's privately owned. They don't have such large investments in the water supply system. And then this is making water supplying harder because there is more citizens now in the town, also because of the droughts and so on. So this was also a good story to introduce you now the private model of governance of water, which is, of course, driven by profits. Maybe, and yes, as you can see, it's managed by private operators, companies, but I also put corporations because usually most of the companies are under certain part of certain corporations, such as I mentioned already, Veola. The risks are monopolization and reduced access for low-income population. But also, when it comes of monopolization, the map that you can see in this slide, and you can see the source is the source and the source of the picture, and it's about where the water supplying system was again put under public governance. And I think this is important to see because I think that only Great Britain back in the 80s was the only state that privatized in total their water supplying systems. Some of the maybe cases that are more familiar are of water recommunalization, as they call it, when you put it under public governance again, are maybe Berlin, France. In France, it's Paris, then Budapest, then also La Paz in Bolivia, and so on. So there are more than 235 cases. I would say maybe this is now even more because this is not so old data, but it's a bit older, and in 37 countries already put under public governance the water that they previously privatized. Also, what is problematic with the privatization, I would say, the problem is when you sign the contract with private operator, it's usually not disclosed to the public, and we don't know what are the conditions of the privatization, and we are giving our ownership mostly on some period of time. Mostly it's done through concessions and public-private partnerships, but it's all part of the privatization. And then you face the problems, and these cases learned us that usually the prices of water become much higher. The maintenance becomes less, maintenance is not so good. They do not invest in workers, and workers' rights are being neglected. Also, there are some cases of corruption already. There are cases of corruption, but also poor quality service is usually what we got through privatization of the water services. Maybe it's better to describe you through one example. So in Bucharest and France, company Vela already mentioned, privatized through model of public-private partnership, the water part of water supplying system there. And this private company that was operating the water also was bribing the councillors in local council. So the water prices have go up to 125% in the period from 2008 to 2015. So on bribery, they even spent 12.4 million euros. And this is all being you can find this data publicly, they are public, because they were making some fictive contracts with this private company. Then the private company did not pay the taxes, so more than 5 million euros. And in the first year, when they privatized one part of the company, they fired 3,000 of workers. And even the management of the company spied its own workers. So this is one of the example in which you can see what can go wrong. And why I'm using this example, because in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and back when Boriša and I were working together in Crvena, we monitored also the investments in, let's say, infrastructural projects. And also we monitored public-private partnerships as a model, what was going on in this. And it was present as a development chance in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in both entities, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Republika Srpska, they use this this example of Bucharest as a positive example of public-private partnership. And that's why we tried to find what was going on in this case. The problem is that usually not public companies, but cities and towns, so a local self-governance level of governance, they do not, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they do not have money for such extensive and costly infrastructural projects. And usually they are in some way, they are even forced to look for the additional capital to maintain the network, let's say, operating. One argument that goes into favor of public model of governance of water is that public governance, like cities and towns, they also can get loans under more favorable conditions than private operators. And this is somehow also not being part of the discussion or which model is better to use to govern the water. And regarding the private governance of water, I would say it's very dangerous to impose these kind of governance, even states such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we don't have such, let's say, good mechanisms of control of corruption. If this went in Bucharest like this, I'm very scared to think how it can look alike in Bosnia and Herzegovina also. Because when we privatize the governance of water, we lose also the potential of political control. As I said, when it's operated by governmental structures, then at least we have one channel of making pressure on legally elected representatives to do something regarding the quality of water supplying system. And I would say the water is becoming very interesting, also before, but now even more very interesting for the markets, because you have monopoly. When you privatize water, you have monopoly because people need it. Not only for drinking, but maybe the example of Zrenjanin, town Zrenjanin here can be interesting to share with you. I remember when I was talking with my friend Milica from Zrenjanin, and Zrenjanin is I think it was third largest workers' town back in Yugoslavia, and after transition, like the people, there are a lot, let's say, of low-income people, and they have problems with water supplying. The problem is natural; it's not something related to maintenance of grid, but they have a lot of arsenic in the water. And to make this water safe for use, it's very costly. And then in one moment, the government privatized the water to solve this problem. The problem is that they give it to the Italian company that never had in its portfolio, they never had any kind of project regarding water supplying or of working on arsenic in water, let's say like that. And then when I was speaking to Milica, she told me, you know, like even people that have, let's say, money that can afford to buy water every day, at one point you cannot buy it every day because you need it for washing, for cleaning, for drinking, for cooking. Like it's not possible not to use water that you know that is poisoned. And this is, I think, something this, at least to me, this example gives me a lot of food for thought, let's say like that. Before I present you now the third model, and it's the, let's say, so-called commoning, or I will not go into theory of commons because we don't have time, but I think it's important maybe just to present you this slide, because in this research we were using methodology based on Elinor Ostrom's research, and Elinor Ostrom simply defines the commons as a resource shared by a group of people, but it's not so simple, but I think it gives us right direction in which this model is heading. And I like to use this quote and these characteristics. They helped me also a lot when I was analyzing certain cases, mostly of the protection of common goods. According to Roger A. Lohmann, as you can see, participation must be free and unforced. Participants must share a common purpose or let's say some common actions also. Also, as you can see, participants must have something in common that they share, and this can be also shared actions. And participation involves philia, and it's usually inadequately translated as friendship, but let's say something positive and something engaging they share. And social relations must be characterized on fairness. And this is something that I can see in the cases of the protection of commons, such as these struggles against construction of small hydropower plants in Bosnia and Herzegovina for the protection of water, but also in the cases of commoning. And I will present you now this one case of through water supplying system of village Luke. Maybe here I can also say that concept of common goods articulates old idea that wealth, that everybody is entitled to wealth, and the resource of community needs to be actively protected and governed by everyone. And this is where it can become a bit tricky. Also here I put some of the references I used in my work. So David Valliere, as you can see, he sees it as a wagon of one composition. You need to have resource, community, and then these rules, traditions, and values, which is part of the commoning. But also I was relying a lot on Silvia Federici, but also some other authors from Italian tradition, I would say, and from the authors that were actively engaged in Beni Comuni movement in Italy. But I think Silvia Federici points out something very well, that in her thoughts, it's the community that is the key element, but not exclusive community, for example, based on ethnicity, but community based on the principles of cooperation, responsibility toward each other, and the earth, forests, seas, and animals. So this is something that I could recognize also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that's why I have used it. So I will go now to case study of Luke water supplying system. I will guide you through some of the parts that you can see on screen. I will share with you now more details on that. Sorry, I have my notes because there was a lot of different data included in this presentation. So regarding, I will give you a bit of history and the context. So Luke, it's a small community, small village in the central Bosnia. And the story about local water supplying system started like 50 years ago, we can say. Look in this legal aspect, it's subsidiarity of so-called local community. In our terms, mjesna zajednica, like English translation is, I would say, not so adequate, but still we use it. And look is subsidiarity of local community called Gojevići. So this is also important for this governance aspect that I will explain. You need also to know that this is Returni village. So after the war, people came back there and also came back to their village to start almost a new life there. And the decision to reconstruct not reconstruct, but to construct new water supply network was made on an assembly of citizens of Mjesna zajednica Luke in 2007. And back then was established the committee for the construction of water supply system. Then they were also thinking on where to find grants for the investment for their water supplying system. They use funds. This is also interesting. They use public funds from the Federal Ministry of Displaced Persons and Refugees, and also the money that they equally collected from years when they started to think on how to provide water services for their households and for their village. So then they, let's say this part of construction of water supplying system when it was finished. So there were a lot of construction going on in the village in front of every house. You can imagine how it's to make water supply grid for 42 houses. So they together constructed this grid, but they used one old let's say basin, one old reservoir for water supplying, and there are these natural springs within this reservoir, which before war was used. It was small and was used for, I think, one public company or something like that that had some facility there. But after the war, they kind of got, let's say, a municipality said to them that they cannot support them in constructing such a large infrastructural project, but also they didn't make any troubles when they used these when they use this for water supplying, this reservoir for water supplying. So after the construction has ended, then the villagers decided to transform the mentioned committee into a new body called Water Committee. That will now have the role to maintain to maintain kind of the grid, and it almost became true institution, I would say. Also, what is interesting that they also use the same model to maintain the local cemetery, and like the same model for what they use for water supplying. So the resource, in this case, which is being governed as commons, is first of all the local water supplying system. And then second, so it's infrastructure, and second, it comes the water as itself, as commons. So the infrastructure, the system consists of a mentioned reservoir, then the pipelines that go through the two houses, and as I already mentioned, all 42 houses are connected to the grid. For water, maybe although it's fresh, they use freshwater springs, and although it's of high quality, water is of high quality, they use chlorine for water disinfection, which is also interesting, and I will tell you a bit afterwards how they are using this. Don't be worried, it's safe. So the community governing the Luke water supply system is the same as the village Luke community. So this means that whole community is using the local water system supply and also participating in decision making on it. And maybe also important to note, during the summer, population is doubling, as I would say now, unfortunately, in most communities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because they have a large diaspora. This was also, I would say, part of when they were collecting funds, also diaspora participated in this. So regarding the institutions which were made to govern the Luke water supply system, and this is related to organizations and rules, Water Committee is main body. And it's elected among the citizens of village Luke. The members are usually prominent villagers who have also certain technical skills related to water, but this is not mandatory. They have 5 members. And in terms of governance of rules for managing the resource, there is a general agreement on on rational use of water. But they are sometimes I would say, forced to use, to impose the reductions in water use until situation is normalized. And this is in the case of hot summers, of droughts, or of potential problem in water supply system. Usually they don't have problem with quantity of water, except in some summer months. So in case the lack of water in the reservoir, they just lower also the let's say the consumption of water, and this decision is also let's say made together with the other villagers. Until I finished this research, so back in 2080, they only used reductions for 4 times. This is interesting, where there was a malfunction in the water supply system, and for regular cleaning of the reservoir. Also, this cleaning of reservoir is a common action, I would say. They have it like I think once a year they have this action, and whole villages also participating in the cleaning of reservoir. So there is also obligation to report excessive water consumption or malfunction in the water supply system. If there is a problem in water supply, members of water committee go out in the field to find out the nature of the problem. There are also rules about financial contributions. So there is this, I will say, small fee. It was back in the days 10 km, so around 5 euros or 5 euros, but on yearly basis, and they collect these funds to have it on a pile, let's say, because if they have some malfunctions, sometimes it can be costly to repair it. That's why they established, I would say, this fund. It's just for the maintain purposes. So maybe here it's regarding the legal status and the regulation of ownership. It's our federal law on water clearly says that water facilities like reservoirs and pipelines must be owned by the municipality unless otherwise specified by the cantonal regulation. In this case, the water supply system Luke is owned by this Luke subsidiary of the local community Gojevići, and which is, let's say, part of the municipality, part of the system of the municipality Fojnica. So we can say it's still in a, this is not, how to say, the role of mjesna zajednica, of local community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but there are many cases of these local supply system being governed by mjesna zajednica. So Luke is not so specific, not the only one, not the only case in Bosnia and Herzegovina for sure. And this is being done because, as I mentioned earlier, municipalities did not have funds to construct these systems by themselves. And so this is kind of still in a gray zone, I would say. However, nowadays there are pressures to put these kind of systems under public governance, under public company governance, and I would say under centralized public systems. And most of the communities are refusing legalization and connection to the Fojnica public, in this case, to the Fojnica public water supply system, because they would have much bigger expenses. And this also can be a problem for low-income community, but also I think that people value their own work that they put in the construction of this water supplying system, and also they value all this what they established, institutions, rules on how to govern, also this fee that they have for the fund for the repairs in the system and so on. So it's not only a matter of paying, of course, it's the important part, but still they usually would pose the question, who is going to pay us for all of these years that we invested in maintaining also this system? So hopefully I managed to at least to give you a glimpse of what was going on in Kruščica. Maybe before I just go through Elinor Ostorm's 8 design principles, it's important to mention that also back in, if I could recall it well, back in 2012, the resistance against construction of small hydropower plant on river Željeznica started in this local community. They were in such a media blockade that rarely people knew about these 24-hour guards in the bank on the banks of river Željeznica, and their resistance lasted for years, and they were first community that went to help the brave women of Kruščica, this case also the protection of river against small hydropower plants. Also, Kruščica is the village that doesn't have water supplying system, public water supplying system for all community. To them also the river is a source of water, source of life, as they say. And because of this struggle, the communication with municipality Fojnica was not, let's say, in a good manner. There were also a lot of different pressures being posed on this community because of the struggle for the river, but recently they managed to win the case on the court, and hopefully this story of the protection of rivers Željeznica ended, but we never know. Sometimes if they change the law, who knows what will happen in the future. So when we used in a study on the commons in Southeast Europe, when we used these 8 design principles of Ostrom for the analysis, and I will now guide you to through them. So regarding the clearly defined boundaries, we concluded that the resource which is being governed as the commons, the boundary, the borders are clearly defined. They are the same as the borders of village Luke, as the water pipes follow to all houses of the village. On the next one, so there is a good connection between appropriation and provision rules for the users of Luke water supply system. While both are well adapted to local conditions, they are mostly related to availability of the water resource. For example, those are the rules to reduce water consumption due to droughts or due to hot summers. On collective choice arrangements, we can say that they are related to the formal and informal governance structure of the Luke subsidiary, as all the residents of Luke are users of water supplying system. And main institution, in this case, we can say is this assembly of citizens. On the monitoring, water committee has this role, and as you could maybe hear from the story, they mostly monitor technical operations. So if there are some problems, they go on the field to see what are the problems and to see how they can be repaired. Regarding the graduated sanctions, there is in this case, there is a clear system of sanctions for violating the rules of governing the Luke water supply system. And sanctions are first, they use verbal warning, and the final sanction is shutting off or disconnection from water supply system. But as to my knowledge, this didn't happen. For conflict resolution mechanisms, the most important mechanism is water committee, which has the role to first negotiate and with the community to solve the problem, and they use a lot of mediation. But you need to know that this is very close community when it comes to use, let's say, mechanisms like mediation. So it's easier to talk with your neighbors and members of your community. And maybe one example. For example, they needed to use privately owned land to establish this, let's say, non-formal water protected zones. You see this for every public water supplying system. We have the levels of water protected zones like 1, 2, 3. And in this case, they needed to use private land to establish this zone. And then at one point, one of the villagers wanted to cut the trees on his own private land, which is now being part of this water protected zone. And they needed to use a lot of mediation and to negotiate with this villager, but also with other neighbors, but it was successfully established. So they needed to explain to people why it's important to certain extent to give up on your right on a private ownership in benefit of common good and commons. On the seventh point, so minimal recognition of rights to organize, we concluded that there is this minimal recognition and to some extent to have the water supply system, but there is growing conflict about how the system should be governed. And this is the conflict I told you, like that they now want to put this under public governance, and also that this conflict emerged from this struggle against this small hydropower plant, but at least that one is finished because the law made decision that that the process of obtaining the documents needed for the construction of small hydropower plant were not done in proper manner, and probably the citizens were not included in decision-making process. And regarding nested enterprise, it was not applicable for the local water supply system, as it's not part of a bigger resource which is under common governance regime, as we concluded. And this was all, and I don't know how much time did I spend. I really tried to be fast, but it was important maybe to present some of the
50 minutes, something like that. It's okay.
Is it okay? Okay, sorry, but and I didn't go into political system of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which could be interesting.
Yeah, that would take us half an hour more at least. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Alma. For this presentation. It was very, very dense, I would say. And now I open the floor for participants to react, to join, ask questions, ask for clarifications, agree or disagree with what was Alma saying. So anybody? Okay, there's Ivana. Please, Ivana. We don't hear you. I don't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was muted. I'm sorry. I was just clapping my hands. I didn't raise the hand. I'm sorry, Boriša. No, I was just clapping my hands.
Okay, don't worry.
Maybe there's someone else.
Okay, there is Janeta. She wants to react. Please, Janeta.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for this talk. I thought it was really, really illuminative and insightful how such a commoning or practice of commoning as governance form works in Luke, and it also gives some kind of hope that it can also be done differently. I was wondering during your presentation whether you have any more insights into how the local community, how they dealt with all the uncertainties that come with regulating groundwater for the water supply, because I wasn't sure, you said freshwater, so I wasn't sure whether you can specify if it's in like a karstic region more. And also just to follow up, I think you can answer this kind of altogether in how they proceeded, for example, also in establishing the sanitary protection zones, and also how they structure and organize the monitoring practices in terms of the quality of water. So is there some kind of laboratory facility, for example, or how do they deal with all of these issues? Thanks.
So thank you for these important questions to clarify the case also. So I'm not sure if this is a karstic region. This part, I would say probably, because most of the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina is this, and they use this. There is this spring of fresh water, and it's probably coming from underground resource of water. Although we didn't specify this in the study, as I could recall. I will share the link for the study after. Yeah, they use this underwater spring of water for water supplying, and they say that it's kako se na engleskom izdašno, it has enough of water to supply this
abundance.
Yes, thank you, of this water supply system for these 42 houses. For the sanitary protection zones, I really don't know how they make this decision. They just mentioned when we were speaking during the interview, like, hey, we use the same model for the cemetery. But I could imagine, because there is a lot of this old community knowledge inherited, I would say, like these older members of the community, probably they know where to do certain things in the village. They do not do it like, hey, we will put something there. No, these decisions are made. Okay, maybe this is the part of village, best part of village to use for, I don't know, something as for example, for cemetery. As for the monitoring goals, yeah, and this is what I didn't mention, and I told you I will mention, now I remembered, this water committee, which is made of five members. One of the member has education from that from that background. So usually he would take the water and then samples, thank you, and then they go to laboratory. That there is according to our law, there are certain laboratories that you can use for this purpose. So they go to facility that can provide this service, and it's being done by the member of committee that has, let's say, expertise to do it properly. But to me, after all of these years that went, it would be interesting to see, for example, if this member went abroad, then how they will resolve this challenge. Probably, at least in my experience, this is part of Middle Bosnia canton, and a lot of small towns and a lot of people are very well connected. So I could imagine that they would find this kind of knowledge, if not within their community, maybe within some very close community. At least this is something related, let's say, to our local realities. And I think, did I manage to answer to all three questions? Great. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wants to comment or ask questions? It's okay. If there are no more questions, maybe I can just put another one. First, this is just related to what were you saying before, and it's just very, I mean, a small question for these monitoring laboratory evaluations. Do they have to pay this service, and are they using the same funds for this service, or it's just something that is provided for them by
it's not provided. No, it's not provided, and they use, I would say, these funds for it.
Okay.
Because if you are not part of the public utility or public supply system, you cannot use these funds. We tried this for some other cases. For example, when we had this spilling of materials of unknown origin into the river Bosna, and even when Safet, for example, would, and he knows when he would took these primjer examples, yes, he paid it from his pockets, let's say like that. So if you are not part of system, you cannot get public funds for it.
Okay, so just to add to that, this was actually my question, and I mean, Alma and I, we were talking a little bit about so to say, looking for beyond these models that Alma was discussing, and looking for some sort of hybrid models of organizing not only water supply, but supply of other life source resources, so to say. And I was thinking, maybe you can reflect a little bit on this. I know we were also writing about this a few years ago. In Croatia, at one point, there was this rather interesting initiative to think through something that they've called public civic partnerships. And then I know that Alma is also thinking a little bit on this, and I'm wondering, how do you see and do you have ideas on how these models can be used for these particular purposes? Because I mean, your examples somehow show that these systems, local systems, mostly local systems, common governance systems, and this also pertains to what Janeta was saying. There are resources there that are missing for the somehow to have a full scale and properly managed water supply system. So I mean, do you have any ideas how this could these sort of public civic or public common systems could be set up, could work, and do you see them also as worthy not only for water supply, but maybe for some other resource systems, so to say?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So just to add, because it came to my mind while you were speaking, like they told me when I was doing back in the days this research, and they told me like, yeah, of course we would like to have systematically solved like these quality of water tests, you know, to be done by the proper institutions. It would be for them also important. But if this means to give in whole their right to manage and to a certain extent the ownership on this common good to the public utility, they wouldn't do it. So maybe that relies in this like public-civic partnership, the same as public-private partnership. Usually, through public-private partnership, they use just one component from the public utility. It's not like that they privatize whole system. For example, they would just privatize the pipes or one part of the company. So maybe it can be used also in this case. For example, this part related to health of the community, let's say like that, could be provided by the public utilities, public services, by the public company. And this, what functions well, let's say, can be still managed by the citizens. If they already established the system and it works, and it based on the also common on participation and in decision making, this is also very important in this case. So I would say, yeah, for sure there is a space for this, especially in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, like we were commenting this, where mjesne zajednice, these local communities, are legal entities. So to a certain extent, they are within the legal system, like that is the reality. They are operating, they exist, but when you go into details, they are not. Because if you remember, I used the word like they want to legalize them. And I think this is the main problem of like what legalization in this context means. Okay, we have the law on water, and I know also that there is now initiative from the non-governmental sector. I think it's led by Arco Center for the changes in the water laws. So maybe this is good chance to open discussion with the government and also public utilities on how to organize this. So I would say beside the water, yes, and what we concluded, like, okay, yes, this is nice example of commoning, you know, it has most of these Elinor Ostrom's 8 points, but it cannot be, let's say, scaled up. For example, the water supplying system of Sarajevo, I cannot imagine it based on this concept because it's pretty complex in Sarajevo, or we would have a lot of small units, and I think it would be messy because the town Sarajevo is also differently organized. And that is where it can become very messy. But for sure, maybe there are, in this study that I shared to you, you could find examples of common pastures, pašnjaci. But this is also some old knowledge. I would say maybe to a certain extent to some of these in smaller communities, to some of the services, as they mentioned, like cemetery or something specific that is clear also to community, but you can also clearly know what you need to done and govern in this case. But for sure, it can be interesting to see how to operate it. And also, I think in this study, you can find Reutz as example of cultural center that is being governed through this public-civic partnership. This is one of the good examples of how it can work in practice with the resource and with the public government. This one is very interesting. I didn't write about it, but I know it gives some of the answers to the question. But for sure, it would be interesting to see it, especially in governance and some natural resources. As I said, Slovenia, yeah, constitution, they protected the water by the constitution, but in political reality, it didn't affect political reality.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wants to throw a comment in? Carlo, please, Carlo.
Hi, Alma. It's great to see you again. I really enjoyed your presentation. I wanted to ask two things. First is related to these introductory slides where you were mentioning, global situation. And given that Balkans is already a very popular area for various extractivist initiatives, do you think we can expect some kind of increased activity of multinationals, multinational corporations in this area, specifically related to water privatization in the following years? This is a more of a general question from someone who doesn't really follow this specific sector, and I would be really interested to hear whether there are some kinds of initiatives taking place in the background. And the second question is related to this tricky relationship between decentralization and privatization, because it seems to me that very often when the state decides, okay, we are going to privatize one aspect of public utilities or public services, the first step is to destroy centrally governed public companies, because then privatization is not, taking place at once, but it takes place in kind of fragments. They're like you privatize bit by bit, and this, of course, does not create so much contention in the public and does not create problems for the private investor to the same extent, at least, in my logic. Of course, we could argue exactly the opposite, that centralizing allows, much easier sell-off. But, I'm kind of afraid that the logic of decentralization very often serves as a groundwork for succeeding privatization. So I would just like to hear a few thoughts from you on that. And thank you for the presentation again.
And thank you, Carly. Although I didn't see you for years, hope this will change in the future. And also, I used in my writings a lot of your. If I could recall, Daniela Dolenec was your mentor also.
Yeah.
So I use a lot of her writings, but there was no time to include some of her great thoughts on many of the aspects of this lecture. So, to give you an answer regarding the global situation, we are now being perceived as something that they called sacrifice zone for the green transition, and I hope that this will not happen, because BiH currently we have a lot of mining developments regarding mining. Adriatic Metals maybe is one you could read about in medias, and all of these mining actions can have a big influence on water. I needed to say also this, and this is when you see it in the discussions, political discussions on this, or in discussion in local government, they don't think on how to preserve the water sources, like in the future developments, and how this will influence our water resources. And Bosnia and Herzegovina is among the countries in Europe that I think we are in top 5 among the freshwater resources in the country. And regarding the multinationals and privatization of water in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we were following this in Crvena, together, and I'm kind of still following developments. Recently, I saw news, they started, before Corona, they started with promotion of public-private partnerships as I said, development solution for the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And during the COVID, this was not so intense, I would say. And 10 days ago, I saw this news on how this model of PPPs can be used to resolve all the problems related to communal services, which are mostly done by a local self-governance level. And the second word after this was water. So to me, this is kind of indicator of intention of the privatization of water supply system, or parts of water supply system. I still don't know how this will work. As I said, in Republika Srpska, part of the share of public utility is open to anybody to buy. So in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are not so many of these practices, but we saw some of the examples. I will send you one big text. It's on our language. You can understand. You can find some data. But I'm afraid that this will come soon on the table, either to negotiate kind of loans to Bosnia and Herzegovina, or as you know, hey, this municipality doesn't have funds to solve this. Okay, we will privatize part of our supplying system to get the funds to repair it or to establish new pipelines or something like that. And this question on this decentralization and privatization, I think this was the usual scenario, and Boriša probably can support me or say some other comment. Usual scenario, what we face here with factories, mostly with factories in Bosnia, big factories in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Usually they made a lot of small companies from this, then they privatized it, and we never saw some, I would say, so successful examples of privatized part of these big companies afterwards. I even posed this question once in Bundestag, but this was like in one of the Bundestag offices related to Bosnia and Herzegovina, CAS, and other. I posed them question like, why do you promote like privatization as a model of governance when we don't have success in this? Like privatization started, I think, back in 1993 already, or something like that, during the war already. And I asked them, can you give me facts, figures? And I didn't got this answer. So I would say from the people that should know better and why this is here. So I think that this is also part of the problem, this decentralization of companies, especially communal services, because usually in this model we saw this privatization through PPPs of just part of the system.
Thank you, Alma. Anybody else wants to comment or ask questions? Okay, if there's no more interventions, I want to thank you all again. Thank you, Alma, for leading this discussion. And I guess I'll be seeing most of you soon in Belgrade. And yeah, that was it.
Thank you, Boriša. The best of luck and good travels for everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.